NVIDIA we have to talk about, right? Because that's going to set the tone in a way for the major indices for the AI trade as well.
And you can do that totally agnostically, not without saying anything about the actual earnings tomorrow?
We can do that for sure.
And what do you say?
It's hard to have an edge ahead of earnings for anyone. But we feel that with the pullback of about 12% from the highs for NVIDIA, we now have a nearly short-term oversold condition as of today coming into the report. So that is, to me, a better scenario, of course, than coming in very overbought hot. The support that I'm watching is quite thin, though, so that's the catch. It's just about $180 for NVIDIA. Below that, I think it has problems. It actually already has problems behind the scenes. The technical indicators have rolled over on the weekly chart to suggest that even if we get a bounce off that short-term oversold, it might be sold.
You said like one positive thing, I think, and I'm going to grasp on that. So you said it is entering in somewhat oversold territory, which could mean that it could be a positive move tomorrow, but then you're saying that doesn't, you're not out of the woods even if that does happen.
Yeah, it would be Thursday, Friday. Well, the other positive, which is probably the most important, is that it's still a long-term uptrend. And in fact, the monthly chart has no issues. It's more of a sort of an intermediate term takeaway that for maybe 2, even 3 months, the indicators point to more corrective action. And listen, it's healthy. It's something that we tend to see after such steep up moves.
And you're saying such a crazy thing. And so if that is positive for NVIDIA, that could be positive for the AI trade, which could be positive
for the Bitcoin trade.
For the S&P trade, which could be positive.
Well, eventually, right? It tells us right now we still have some risks.
It could somewhat dampen the bubble talk if NVIDIA...
I think it's already been dampened, especially with some of these treasury companies. It feels already like sentiment has shifted enough that we're kind of out of that mode.
Really?
I think so. And when you look at any AI proxy, and I think it was the Goldman Sachs non-profitable tech basket, that's already broken down. It's already broken short-term support. So I feel like the shift is already there. And we're not quite there yet in terms of the intermediate-term metrics looking promising. But to me, the long-term trends are still fine.
Threat will it pose to ChatGPT? Well, of course, it's always going to be about inference and reasoning.
Jensen Huang, who will speak tomorrow, will say, I think that the Vera Rubin is much better at reasoning.
Right. But that's the chip that would be used. But in this case, I make this point a lot, but I want to explain it. Google, for inference, uses their own design chips, and then they manufacture them at TSMC. They're called GPUs. It gives them a cost advantage over those who have to rely on the chips you just mentioned.
They're worth
because NVIDIA charges a lot more. And so if those TPUs are as effective as many believe for inference, it does give them a cost advantage per token over some of their competitors.
No doubt.
Whether that will ultimately matter, I don't know.
Well, I think it keeps OpenAI out of aggressive search. I think that Meta is down most severely because they were the ones that said they're going to spend the most, but Meta does not want OpenAI coming into social. Microsoft is B2B, business to business, which I think is really good. And OpenAI's business is B2C, and I don't like business to C.
It's a lot more consumer, right? Anthropic is obviously more in the enterprise.
And we are getting some breaking news crossing on another big AI investment, and for that, we're going to turn to Steve Kovac. Hey, Steve.
Hey there, Carl. Yeah, here we go with another big AI deal. This one is involving Anthropic, Microsoft, and NVIDIA. So let me tell you what's going on here with all the numbers. Anthropic is saying it's going to spend $30 billion in compute from Microsoft. That would obviously be through the Azure service, and NVIDIA, obviously, through their GPUs and chips. And they're going to contract up to 1 gigabyte of compute power on top of that. Also, on top of that deal that Anthropic is committing to, NVIDIA and Microsoft are going to be investing in Anthropic, with NVIDIA saying they're going to invest up to $10 billion, Microsoft up to $5 billion. Now, no details on what that up to exactly means and what sort of performance metrics or what have you Anthropic needs to meet in order to attract that investment. But very significant here because, of course, Microsoft is the primary backer of Anthropic's biggest rival, OpenAI. So now we're seeing Microsoft starting to take not only open up its computing platform to these other AI companies and AI models, which it's been doing for some time, but also investing in these rivals to OpenAI. This is a very significant moment with respect to that. And also, we should just talk about these Anthropic models are now going to be hosted on Azure. They've already had some limited partnership going on here between Anthropic and Microsoft. Now the latest and greatest models are going to be available through Microsoft's Azure cloud services, whether that's for developers and things like that, presumably also making their way into more Microsoft products. Now, guys, I'm out here in San Francisco because it's the Microsoft Ignite conference, and I'm going to be talking during Power Lunch with Microsoft's new commercial CEO, Jensen Huang, about this new deal, about all of that, and about how they're going to be leveraging some of these new technologies into their Copilot products, guys.
All right, Steve, we talk about the circular nature of many of these deals, and this certainly seems to fit the narrative. Again, I know you've outlined it for us. Now, NVIDIA and Microsoft are committing to invest up to $10 billion and $5 billion, respectively, in Anthropic.
Correct.
Last value for Anthropic, I believe, is $183 billion, at least the last time they raised any capital. Is this at a new level? Do you happen to know?
Yeah, they're not saying if this is at a new valuation or anything like that. And also, I'll just point out this $30 billion in commitment in spend from Anthropic. Anthropic's revenues are in like the low single-digit billions on an annual basis, I believe. So even less than what we've heard from OpenAI. So they would need to have quite an extraordinary growth rate, just like OpenAI is predicting, in order to meet this. And I will just again highlight this investment from NVIDIA and Microsoft, David. It's a little loosey-goosey here. They're saying up to, and they're not exactly saying why or why not, they would go up to that amount. So presumably there are some metrics that Anthropic will have to hit to get that cash, David.
Right. And just to point out, so NVIDIA invests money in Anthropic. Anthropic commits to spending $30 billion with Microsoft. Microsoft buys NVIDIA GPUs to power the compute that is provided for Anthropic. So there's the circle to a certain extent.
Yeah, my head's spinning just hearing that.
Yeah. The other thing, Steve, is how quickly that exclusivity with OpenAI, kind of these relationships are splintering in real time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we've been watching this it's like the longest divorce ever, right, Carl? Watching OpenAI and Microsoft slowly drift further and further apart, becoming less and less dependent on it. And to your point, yes, when they had that new agreement just a few weeks ago, OpenAI no longer has to go to Microsoft for the right of first refusal to get into Azure. We've, of course, seen them cutting deals with so many others, and now Microsoft is playing the other side of that. Pretty soon after that OpenAI deal, boy, they go right after Anthropic, lock down some revenue from that company. And by the way, Anthropic's playing around too. They just had a big data center open up with Amazon and AWS, and that is part of their cloud provider too. Obviously, Amazon is a big investor. And Google as well in Anthropic, guys.
Well, all right, let's stick with earnings and a much bigger company than Klarna. That would be NVIDIA, of course, reporting tomorrow. CEO Jensen Huang. They already have given away the big surprise of the quarter. Christina Partsinevelos joins us, and she will explain. Christina.
I will. And so you mentioned NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, talking about this big reveal. At the GTC Tech Conference just at the end of October, he showed $500 billion in cumulative chip orders stretching through the end of next year on a slide. The stock hit $212 the next day on October 29th, an all-time high, and it's been down 10% ever since. Options traders are now pricing in at least a 6% swing post earnings, the biggest in over a year. But analysts really think the stock could be flat even on a beat because the good news already came out. And I have to point out, too, I was just looking at a note, investor appetite has also shifted. Citi's recent client sentiment check shows that NVIDIA is, quote, less popular than AMD and Broadcom, given EPS growth for both AMD and Broadcom being a little bit higher than NVIDIA. And to just go back to that October conference, it was very specific for NVIDIA. NVIDIA's CEO broke from the company's typical 1 quarter at a time guidance, and companies typically only provide 1 quarter at a time guidance and provided visibility actually throughout all of next year. He essentially gave investors the headline before earnings even happened. And there's another dynamic at play. If NVIDIA beats if it's beyond $2 billion, it could amplify concerns that AI spending has gotten excessive and unfundable. Credit markets are already anxious about these massive data center buildouts, but if it's just a modest beat, just $2 billion on the dot, investors might read that as growth normalizing faster than expected. So Wednesday's report really becomes more about validating what NVIDIA's CEO already said than revealing anything new. The stock may have peaked right after GTC in October for a reason, because investors already got the news, and now they're just checking the math. And one more point, guys. You were talking about the circularity of that new deal with Anthropic. David Faber, you were spot on in regards to the timeline that is missing. You have NVIDIA investing in these firms, but these firms are not necessarily buying all the promised compute at the moment because they need the revenues to do so. So the circularity almost becomes a demi-circle because we have to wait until they actually can start affording to build out these massive data infrastructures. And so I feel like that's a really important point, because NVIDIA doesn't always get the cash flow coming back to them immediately in the next year or so.
Here they're speaking specifically about Grace Blackwell and Vera Rubin systems for that 1 gigawatt. And remember, that's how we describe the ultimate amount of compute and the amount of power that it consumes, 1 gigawatt, which is a lot. What's a gigawatt? I kind of know now. It's like 800,000 homes, I think, something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say 75,000, so 800,000. Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I've done it enough now. It might be right. But the point is, it's an awful lot of power. But yeah, I mean, listen, Oracle, OpenAI is obviously the biggest one, $300 billion over 5 years. And again, they've got to build it. And then OpenAI is committed to using it, right?
Exactly. And we talk about power constraints, but there's labor constraints. There's all of the red tape to continue to build out, which we know Micron has faced issues just here in New York, upstate New York. And there's been other issues with water in Arizona. So I feel like environmental issues will play a big role with this continuous promised build out. And so the timelines are just a little bit murky, and perhaps we should be a little bit more skeptical about all of the spending happening in the near term, which would then question, would you say that the stock is up for a little while, or are investors really willing to be patient to actually see the run up in this over the next 5 years or so? Because it takes a long time to build these data infrastructure systems.
Yeah. 750,000 homes if they were efficient at the high end. So I was a little high, but close.
I've seen a lot of like 2 Atlantas or something like that. We're measuring them in cities now.
Yes.
A city is a unit of power.
Yeah, I mean, what Meta's building in Louisiana is, it's off the charts.
The issue that you had in the networking bubble around this was that there wasn't an off-ramp big enough. There was no amount of ads that Yahoo was selling to Procter & Gamble or Disney or AT&T that was going to justify the amount of investment that they were spending with Nortel and Cisco and those other companies in the loop.
But this time there is?
There seems to be. I mean, and that's where our comfort around that comes from, that backlog number at all of those cloud service providers accelerating the way that it is. And you have to separate out the backlog that's coming from the AI labs versus the backlog that's coming from the enterprises. But the enterprise demand seems to be there to justify paying for this.
What do you need to hear from NVIDIA tomorrow?
Look, I think you need to hear that growth's accelerating the way that we're seeing from all of their customers. Their customers are telling us that in demand is accelerating, which means they're having to accelerate CapEx, which means demand for NVIDIA's chips should also be
But don't we know that that's happening already?
I mean, we do, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was saying when I said we got all of this good news in September. We essentially pre-traded a lot of this good news. Now it's going to depend on the outlook and whether or not NVIDIA sees that outlook continuing and how much investors are willing to trust them when they say
and a reasonable time range for guidance is 27. Can we take that number home?
I mean, whether or not they actually give that level of guidance, I'd be surprised by. But I think they certainly are going to, Jensen is not afraid of giving long-term projections around this. He's talked about the $3 to $4 trillion he sees them getting to in 2030. I think to the extent, as long as he kind of maintains that sort of number, the trajectory of exactly how we get there is a little less relevant.
All right, I hope you're all doing well today and staying calm in this market. Market participants were nervous early in today's trading session as the market braces for NVIDIA earnings on Wednesday and for a wave of economic data following the reopening of the federal government. As the day has progressed, there have been multiple important NVIDIA announcements. Today, NVIDIA, Microsoft, and Anthropic announced a strategic partnership. Under the partnership, Anthropic is to scale Claude on Microsoft Azure. Anthropic is to adopt the NVIDIA architecture, and both NVIDIA and Microsoft are to invest in Anthropic. This is a very big deal given the history between NVIDIA and Anthropic Anthropic, which I'm not going to get into in this video, but I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, under the partnership, Anthropic has committed to purchase $30 billion of Azure compute capacity and a contract additional compute capacity up to 1 gigawatt. And for the first time, Anthropic and NVIDIA are partnering to establish a deep technology partnership to support Anthropic's growth. The two companies will collaborate on design and engineering and optimize future NVIDIA architectures for Anthropic workloads. Anthropic's compute commitment will initially be up to 1 gigawatt of compute capacity with NVIDIA Blackwell and Rubin systems. NVIDIA and Microsoft will each invest $10 billion and $5 billion respectively into Anthropic. If you're unfamiliar with Anthropic, they primarily serve enterprise clients, and their business is growing extremely fast right now. And this partnership is a very big deal because up to this point, Anthropic has primarily used alternatives to NVIDIA's hardware, such as Amazon's Trainium and Google's TPUs. But now with today's announcement, this partnership marks a key turning point between the two companies, and moving forward, Anthropic will be a large customer of NVIDIA's. And I think the return on NVIDIA's $10 billion investment in Anthropic will turn out to be fantastic. Anthropic is expected to be cash flow positive by 2027, and their business is scaling extremely fast. This partnership is very positive news. Also today, the president said that Saudi Arabia has agreed to invest $600 billion in the U.S., and that number may go up. And the Saudi crown prince then said that Saudi Arabia will increase their U.S. investment to $1 trillion. This includes investments in AI infrastructure. The president also said today that they're negotiating chip export licenses to Saudi Arabia. This story is very relevant to NVIDIA as it involves large-scale sovereign AI deals. As I've said in previous videos, I'm expecting certain large-scale sovereign AI deals to start to show up either in revenue or revenue guidance, either on NVIDIA's Q3 or Q4 reports. Looking ahead, we have NVIDIA earnings this Wednesday, November 19th after market close. We're expecting revenue growth acceleration given NVIDIA's Q3 guidance and due to the swift production ramp of Blackwell Ultra. As a reminder, we were expecting Blackwell Ultra production to ramp substantially starting in September. And Foxconn just recently reported very strong earnings and guidance, saying that AI rack shipments increased 300% quarter over quarter and are expected to double in Q4. Foxconn's very strong report is a strong indication that Blackwell Ultra production has ramped substantially in a very short amount of time. That bodes well for NVIDIA. I also expect Jensen to talk about agentic AI on the earnings call, given his previous commentary. I'm expecting a surge in compute demand fueled by agentic AI that extends well into 2026. I also expect a key question on the earnings call to be the question about the useful life of a GPU, given Michael Burry's recent comments. In case you missed it, Michael Burry recently posted on X saying that hyperscalers are understating the depreciation of GPUs, and that by extending the useful life of those assets, they are artificially boosting earnings. I disagree with this analysis, as I've discussed in previous videos. In short, I disagree with the premise that the hyperscalers are claiming a longer useful life on the GPUs in order to artificially boost earnings. Rather, I think the hyperscalers have simply come to the realization that the useful life of the GPUs is longer than what they originally estimated due largely to two factors: NVIDIA's continuous improvement of older generation hardware through software, and second, a severe shortage of compute in the face of extremely strong AI demand. Since the world is compute-constrained, developers will use whatever compute they can get their hands on, including compute that under normal circumstances would be considered older generation. This extends the useful life of the hardware. Additionally, we have to consider inference. Real-time inference substantially increases the need for more compute, and the introduction of advanced reasoning models and real-time inference is something that Burry fails to mention in his post on X. It's not enough to simply train AI models. You then have to provide access to those models at scale through real-time inference. If we thought training required a lot of compute, what about real-time inference processing billions upon billions of tasks every single day? This drastically increases the need for more compute in a world that was already compute constrained, and thereby increases the useful life of the compute that is available. Now, if we eventually get to a point where the world is no longer compute constrained, then that changes things. But I honestly think we're at least 3 to 5 years away from something like that happening, if it happens at all. Jensen appears to agree with this time frame, given his commentary on the BG Squared podcast back in September. Also be prepared for November 25th. That's when Burry is revealing something else. I think he may be starting a blog, but I'm not sure. And Burry told us in his post to expect more detail about GPU depreciation and the hyperscalers supposedly overstating earnings. I would not be surprised if tech stocks, including stocks like NVIDIA and were to react negatively when that is released, even if Burry's analysis turns out to be incorrect. So be prepared for that, just in case on November 25th, we may see some volatility. Now going back to NVIDIA earnings. I expect Jensen will likely get some question regarding this graphic. He showed at GTC in October, saying NVIDIA has orders on the books for $500 billion of cumulative revenue from Blackwell and early ramps of Rubin through the end of 2026. I want to remind you all that this is cumulative revenue for both 2025 and 2026. Jensen was not saying that we're going to see $500 billion in just the next 5 quarters. He's saying that by the time we get to the end of those 5 quarters, NVIDIA is looking at $500 billion in cumulative revenue from Blackwell and Rubin. Cumulative is the key word here. There was some confusion about this topic online after Jensen's GTC keynote because many people online took Jensen's words in a Bloomberg interview out of context. In that interview, the interviewer assumed the $500 billion in revenue was over 6 financial quarters, and Jensen responded by saying, quote, 5 financial quarters. But again, he was talking about cumulative revenue over a 2-year period. He told us on stage that 6 million GPUs have already shipped. That would be about $150 billion. And that would mean we're looking at roughly $350 billion in Blackwell and Rubin revenue over the next 5 financial quarters. Add the $350 billion yet to ship to the $150 billion that has already shipped, and you get $500 billion or $500 billion in cumulative revenue. Now, let's talk about what to do ahead of earnings. I'm not a financial advisor, and so I cannot tell you what to do. That said, I will share some thoughts for you to consider that I think may be helpful to you. First, you need to have a clear understanding of what type of position this is. Is this a short-term trade, or is this a long-term investment that you intend to hold for multiple years? Once you know the answer to that question, the decision-making process becomes much easier. Short-term trades are a more complex situation, but if I'm a long-term investor, I would prefer to hold through earnings, go through the earnings report, listen to the earnings call, and take some time to process the results. And if nothing has fundamentally changed about the company in a negative way, and the company is still making great progress forward, then I have no reason to sell. It's that simple. Now, I do want to offer a word of caution when it comes to holding options through earnings. Typically right before NVIDIA earnings, volatility rises notably, juicing up options premiums. And then the day after NVIDIA reports earnings, volatility usually plummets, pulling down option premiums with it. This is what is known as implied volatility crush, or IV crush for short. An IV crush is no joke. And so for me personally, I don't want to hold any option position through earnings because the implied volatility crush after NVIDIA earnings is usually very substantial. Again, I'm not telling you what to do, and this is not financial advice. If you need help with your situation, feel free to reach out to a certified financial professional who can help you with your unique circumstance. While I expect NVIDIA to report great results, I don't know how market participants will react in the short term. But regardless of how the stock trades in the short term, I continue to be bullish on NVIDIA long term, and I seriously think this company still has plenty of runway ahead of it. The reality is that the world is severely compute constrained in the face of very strong AI demand, and that will likely continue for at least the next few years. Over the medium term, I'm expecting a surge in compute demand fueled by agentic AI that extends well into 2026. After that, I think the next major surge in compute demand will likely be fueled by physical AI. Physical AI is a massive long-term growth opportunity for NVIDIA, and I don't think it gets enough attention. NVIDIA sells the hardware for the data centers where the models are trained. They offer Omniverse where the models are taught and tested, and NVIDIA also sells the hardware that allows on-device real-time inference through NVIDIA AGX, allowing robots to have intelligent interactions with the real world even when they are not connected to a data center. Notice that NVIDIA is taking a holistic platform approach to physical AI, and they're embedding themselves as the underlying foundation supporting all of it. Over 2 million developers are already building on the NVIDIA robotics stack. Physical AI will fundamentally transform society, and NVIDIA stands to benefit massively. This is not getting enough attention right now, but I think it will get a lot of attention in 2026 and 2027. In addition to physical AI, NVIDIA has multiple other large long-term growth opportunities, including sovereign AI, enterprise AI, many AI-native startups, telecommunications, and 6G and quantum GPU supercomputing. Jensen believes that quantum computers will not replace classical systems, but that they will work together and complement each other. These additional opportunities in customer segments will increase the need for compute even further. As for production ramps, Blackwell Ultra is ramping very quickly right now, leading to revenue growth acceleration. Rubin is on track to launch in 2026. Then we're expecting Rubin CPX at the end of 2026. Later on, we're expecting the launch of Rubin Ultra in 2027 and Feynman after that in 2028. We have a clear data center product roadmap stretching into 2028, and Jensen believes there will be $3 to $4 trillion of global AI factory buildout between now and 2030. That means Jensen is expecting growing AI demand and an expanding total addressable market underpinning all of this. I don't think we are anywhere near any type of bubble bursting type of event. With all of this in mind, I seriously think that NVIDIA still has plenty of runway ahead of it, and I think this company will be worth substantially more in future years than it is today. At least that's my view of the situation. Remember to stay calm in this market. Remember to maintain a long-term perspective, and do not make any hasty or irrational decisions. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.